FYI, Comrade Deirdre Griswold wrote a great article on the Mueller report. In between the lines, it goes into a lot of good stuff. The contradictions, the character of the FBI, and how could progressive people be loving the FBI, when what they do is terrorize the workers and the oppressed. And also all the other issues that the politicians are not paying attention to, from climate warming to the opioid epidemic to the pauperization of large sections of the working class and the masses. So please read it. How many people have been riveted by Russiagate? Just a thing. Well, I'm so glad, because for those who are seeing this on streaming, there was absolutely no response to that. It's been going on for 2 years, and this is part of the liberal bourgeoisie's, well, not the liberal, this is part of their problem. They poured so much into it. CNN, MSNBC, Rachel Maddow, they're saying the same things every day. It's so boring, but they're so weak now. The section of the bourgeoisie that thought that this was the way to take down Trump is really so weak, that that's part of the problem, In many ways, Russiagate, and as you all know, the FBI guy Mueller, gave his report to the Attorney General, and he made some 4-page memorandum on it, and now they're going to fight to see the whole thing, and they want us to get behind them. Not that some of us might be curious and want to see it, but really, that's our program, for the workers. It's a continuation of the 2016 elections politically, and a denial. A wing of the ruling class is still in denial. They're not accepting that Hillary Rodham Clinton didn't win because they didn't engage the workers and the oppressed. Because essentially, they're neoliberal globalists, neocons, that threw the working class under the bus. And that is why they lost, more than Russia, more than anything else, more than any other variable, although there was a lot of voter suppression, not only in the South, but all over the country, especially against black and brown people. It is the crisis of bourgeois liberalism. What is bourgeois liberalism? I'm not going to talk about the Mueller report. I'm going to talk about this politically, the bottom line, what to take away for the class struggle. What's bourgeois liberalism? What has it always been? It's a mask. It's a mask to hide reactionary capitalism, and to pretend that there's a distinction at the end of the day between liberalism and reactionary capitalism, when we all know, most of us, that it's not, and more people are waking up to that reality, that there's no difference. I think in many ways the working class is well ahead of some of the progressive movement, certainly some of these TV talking heads that would give you the impression that we're defending democracy and capitalism is decent, and all this is at stake because of Trump. Trump is essentially, I've said it, other people have said it, it's the truth. And only that section of the ruling class that is very deluded is in denial of it. He's the face of capitalism. He's not an abstraction. He only does what they all do, but he does it openly and brazenly. And it's so unfortunate what elements in the liberal bourgeoisie who are trying to, restore faith and confidence on the part of the masses in the mainstream of the Democratic Party. It's a capitalist party. That, we're fighting this good fight to be a decent capitalist country, to have fair media. It sort of falls out your mouth like dry oatmeal. It's all bullshit. A lot of, Trump and the people who are in the leadership of his movement, make no mistake, they're fascists. They're oriented toward fascists. But the funny thing about them, sometimes they tell the truth. The media does lie. The media does lie. Now, Trump's involvement with Russia, on one level, he represents some in the bourgeoisie that have come to the conclusion that our old alliances, particularly with the European imperialist powers, it's not going to solve our crisis, so we might as well maneuver and do other things. I don't know how popular that is in the bourgeoisie. For the sake of argument, I don't think most of the bourgeoisie feels that way. But there's a big section of the bourgeoisie that says, oh my good, we might as well try something else. Their real threat is China, in a way, much more than Russia, but Russia's a problem. And on top of that, if news came out, foolproof news that, Trump has financial dealings in Russia and wants to build a Trump hotel in Moscow, sure, that's how they function. That's crony capitalism, It was invented in this country. It's no big deal. But the struggle in the ruling class is really between the neocons and globalists and those who want to pull away and do something different. And part of that difference is becoming more reactionary against the oppressed, or at least being more blatant about it, because the globalists and the neocons and the neoliberals, like the Clintons, they're as much against the oppressed as any as the right wing are. They just, they do their dirty work behind the scenes, Now the political crisis in the world and in this country is such that it allowed for somebody who just says it all out, Lesson 1. The workers don't seem to care about this. Now, we haven't done a survey, and I'm sure that there are a lot of progressive people who hoped that the Mueller report would bring Trump down and be the first step toward impeachment, and among some milieu, they're probably a little down over the last week, including some people who just honestly oppose Trump as a reactionary, and they're spoon-fed their orientation from the bourgeoisie, so they get behind U.S. imperialism. That's part of the problem. See? But according to the bourgeois polls, the masses are not interested in this. They don't care about it. It doesn't come up. It's like 20th on a list. The first thing is health care, which is under attack, and jobs, and job security, and economic rights. And then comes things like misogyny and racism and immigrant rights. Caring about Russiagate is way down there. They don't, all these investigations, some of them have started, there'll be more of them, apart from Russiagate, about Trump's financial dealings. He didn't pay his taxes, he cheats, he lies, he's a swindler. The workers know this. They're instinctively smarter than the ruling class. It is a problem, a big problem, on the part of some of the working class, that out of desperation, and because they've been told that they're losing their country and losing their white privileges, that they'll forget everything reactionary and go along with Trump. That's one problem. That's a big problem. But the working class is not shocked by the fact that a billionaire is a liar and a cheat and a robber baron, because they all are. They all are. If you're going to investigate him, investigate yourself. Investigate the whole capitalist system. Sometimes I think our slogan should be impeach capitalism. I'm not sure if it fits. I don't know the exact definition of impeachment, whether it's legalistic and it doesn't fit, like trying to put a saddle on a cow or something. But that's really where we should go. And it's so important to go over this because this is a time when the masses are becoming more and more radicalized by conditions, by expose of the system, by the economic inequality. And the last thing, if you're progressive, if you have a progressive bone in your body, the last thing you want to do is try to lift up this phony baloney thin mask of U.S. capitalism being so great, and let's just bring it back to being decent and civil. What crap! It's in the interest that the mass be shattered, and it's one of the reasons why the forces that are trying to do that are so isolated. By the way, I don't watch C-SPAN a lot, and they have a lot of hearings. I don't know what, they have all sorts of committees in the Senate and Congress. Maybe there's been a hearing on the opioid epidemic and, the increased rate of suicides, which is directly connected to deindustrialization, to globalization, to decent jobs, union-paying jobs going away and destroying cities. But I haven't seen a hearing on that. Maybe there was one. Maybe 5 people were there. But I didn't see the cameras. I didn't see CNN. It wasn't live at prime time, The same thing for how the working class is being pauperized. And the difference in the conditions and circumstances under which they live compared to a generation or two ago. That would be a great hearing. That would tell a lot more truth than saying that, the official unemployment rate is now 4%, which gives you the impression that everybody's got a job, which is, of course, ludicrous. I don't see even climate control. These are just some of the things that Deirdre raised in her article. Students are going on strike around the world because, whatever else, they want a planet when they grow up to be adults. They don't want the planet to be gone. And it's a clear, immediate, existential danger, And actually, we should talk more about this. We will be talking more about it and become more expertise because there are differences in that movement. I'm sidetracking a little bit. Some of that movement is anti-capitalist. And I think one of the slogans, may even be the name of the group, I think it's something like system change, not climate change, And there's a struggle, and the new Green Deal is in there. At the right time, soon, the party's going to have to wrap his head around this and, sort that all out and come up with instinctively we have a good position, but we may need to have a more informed position because it's what, radicals are talking about, whether it's millennials or whatever generation. Lesson 3. This is really back to basics. Put aside the Mueller report. I've been thinking why Mueller, after all of this waiting and all of the money in the 2 years, came out and said, basically there's no crime. There may be a lot of interesting, juicy details in whatever we see of the report, but, it's doubtful there's going to be some impeachment. I say that advisedly. Things change. You never know. But no criminal charges, even against Trump's, peons around him, his family. See, my gut tells me that Mueller is he is a pillar of the state. He's like a general, and these political people tend to be very sophisticated. And I wouldn't be surprised if he's been paying attention and talking to everybody, and they said, if you suggest that Trump should be brought up on charges, there'll be political instability. And so if you want to keep things quiet, maybe you better do it this way, and the heck with those who had such high expectations about impeachment. I'm not sure about that, but I look around the world. Look at the yellow vests. Look at what's happening. Look at what's happening in Britain, with Brexit, Trump is about the working class. To what extent is he about the working class? In relative terms, 110%. I'm not saying that there are other things that aren't interesting about him, whether he has all his faculties, that he's a blatant neo-fascist and all the other terrible things. But it's about the working class. What is the phase that we're going through from the point of view of the workers in this country? And to a large extent in the other major industrialized, high-tech imperialist countries in Europe and elsewhere. The workers are losing. They're losing their standard that was based on imperialism being strong. And in a relative sense, the capitalist system being stable by comparison to what's happening now and what's been happening for a while. So there's a leveling. We haven't talked about this in a long time, but it's good to remind ourselves. There's a leveling of social conditions. The oppressed, wherever they are still, and it will remain that way for a long time, still far worse off. But the aristocracy of labor, what we used to call that, that's being pummeled. And this is dangerous for the ruling class. They fear it. And this is when they start thinking about introducing either wholesale or in small doses fascist measures. You get into a discussion with a good comrade about fascism, or a knowledgeable in history and ideology, a political person, and they might say, and it's justifiable, well, how can you talk about the threat of fascism here? I mean, there's not 50% unemployment. It's not even like the Great Depression when there was 25%. There's not the big soup lines. Well, a lot of the poverty is hidden. A lot of the poverty is hidden. And they'll say, oh, it's not like Europe. They dealt with the workers with fascism, breaking them up literally, violently, in Germany and Italy and Spain. So, remember this, comrades. When the ruling class is scared, it's not just afraid when the workers are rising up. They're fearful of even the prospect of them rising up. And some of them will do whatever they can to sabotage that possibility. And that is what Donald Trump is about. Sabotaging the prospects, the inevitability of the workers rising up and doing another number of other things. Coming into class consciousness, not just on a local basis, but on an international basis. These are the things that are happening before our eyes in an uneven process. And Trumpism is desperately trying to hold that back. America first, build the wall. Immigrants are our enemies. Desperately trying to do it. Now, when I say desperate, it implies that he will fail. And as revolutionaries, we believe he will. But that doesn't mean it's not dangerous. And it also doesn't mean that it's run its course. Put another way, the fascist threat still exists of it deepening, of it becoming more and more of a movement. It's just now, just in the recent period, that the global economy, including the U.S. economy, is sort of going through another phase and slowing down and on its way to another crisis, like '08 or worse. And so all this is happening, and you have to bear this in mind with all that's happening politically. It's the same thing with Brexit. Brexit's about the working class. Brexit's about desperation to divide the working class. There's no economic benefit either for the capitalists, if there are, it's very small, and certainly for the rest of the masses in Britain or the rest of the UK for Brexit. As a matter of fact, in some ways, if you look on the face of it, it's a big economic crisis. It's kind of shooting yourself in the nose to spite your face, you know. But there's such desperation to change the subject for the working class so that it won't turn against capitalism. It comes back to the working class. And it's important for anybody who thinks that just because the working class isn't rising up, isn't erecting barricades and singing the International and promising socialism not later but soon, maybe next year or something like that, well, they're out of sight, out of mind. The ruling class, its most important thinkers, they are worried about the ruling class, and so should we. And this brings me to my final point. Now, Trump's got an idea. Earlier in his reign, there was a lot more discussion about it. But if you look at the budget, and if you look at privatization, you know, I think that's basically what they want to do. They want to privatize healthcare, you know. So maybe there'll be a struggle. If it's dominated by the bourgeoisie, I'm not sure it'll be that helpful. But then there are people who are very fearful of losing whatever coverage they got. As I think most of you have heard, you know, there's a big attack on the remnants of the Affordable Care Act, you know, people with pre-existing conditions. What's been happening behind all of the crazy vitriol is the defunding of social services. Actually, the education workers are rebelling in large part because of this, which is why their struggle is so incredible, because it's not just their wages and working conditions. They're striking against the defunding of public education. And that's why it's so popular. It's a great struggle. The comrades in the Labor Caucus had a discussion about it a few nights ago, and they should bring it to the rest of the party. When Trump got elected, some of the analysts said something that was very noteworthy, I thought, because it made his economic program sort of simple and easy to grasp. Trumpism and the people around him, they're looking at the South historically. Low wages, union busting, lower social services, deeper entrenched poverty, more racism, more white supremacy. What was the deal? That's changing. But what was the deal? What was the terrible, dirty deal made with the white workers and a big section of the white masses in the South? You can hold on to your white privilege if you tolerate low wages and no unions and a substandard living conditions by comparison to the North. That was the terrible deal. Trump wants to make that countrywide. He's doing the same thing. They won't get away with it because the conditions are going to push people to rebel. And they're going to get worse as the capitalist slowdown gets there. See? In order to do this, though, you've got to divide the working class. You've got to do it. The party is small, even with our allies, of whom we still have many, through several generations, in the labor movement and in all the struggles. We can't just sit back and talk about this. There's too much at stake, and the danger that events could occur that strengthen those who want to really rev up fascism, it's still there. We have got to turn the party now toward the working class in a much bigger way. This does not mean giving up our struggle in solidarity with Venezuela. It is a class issue. It's not just an anti-war issue, And more, we're going to have to become better at drawing the connections so that, the anti-war movement, that's what we think of it now, it really should be the working class and the oppressed who are fighting to support the Bolivarian Revolution and who want to defend it against imperialism. Someday we'll get that. I know that was Lenin's dream, that was the revolutionaries' dream, that there would be no need for a separate anti-war movement, that the anti-war movement would be indistinguishable from the workers. Actually, there are great examples of this. The Russian Revolution was one. Some of the rebellions that almost turned into revolution around that same time period of 1917, 1918, 1919, in Germany, in Poland, even in Paris, and they were even fearful about it in Britain. They were soldiers and sailors demoralized by the war who were open to revolutionary agitation, So that's what imperialist war can do. And that was the old school communist orientation. If there's a war, you bring it home. And if you can, you make a revolution out of it. What can we do? We have a long way to go. Very soon, the party will be announcing how we announce it. We're going to figure that out in the next few days. The establishment of workers' solidarity days on a monthly basis. And we're going to see how far it can go and who will embrace it, not just in this country, but around the world, which is something that you can do now because of social media. It'll help us support gig workers. I noticed some comrades who have been sending out articles about some of them striking, Uber and Lyft workers, It'll help us support the education workers. It'll help us support immigrants. The theme of Workers' Solidarity Day is no walls in the workers' struggle. That's our theme, Now, what is its purpose? On one hand, maybe it doesn't catch on. Maybe we have to go back to the drawing board and do some strategizing. Maybe it does catch on. In time, it should be helpful in organizing workers. Workers who are organizing wherever they are, or workers who are striking, or having any kind of fight. The workers right here in New York City, the Laundry Workers Center. Workers' Solidarity Day is for them. But I would submit that at the moment, the main need for Workers' Solidarity Day is not yet to help workers organize. That's inherent in it. That's the inherent potential. It could lead to all sorts of things if it takes off. We'll have to find out. Right now, it's a political campaign. It's a political campaign to fight against the ruling class's war on workers' solidarity. Right now, its political purpose is the most important thing. There are many workers who are either retired or because of conditions and circumstances, they can't organize. They're atomized. That's a big thing with globalization and technology. There are a lot of workers in small places that feel all alone. Many of them, even though they may be radical, I think this is very true of a lot of young workers. They don't even see themselves as part of the working class. They don't know what they are. It's one of the reasons why they're so depressed, because they feel so personally isolated and insignificant. We need a campaign that, among other things, tells these people, no, you're part of the working class. Whether you work in a shop with 3 people, whether you have a gig job, whether you can't work because you're disabled, whether you can't stay in one job and you have 6 or 7 jobs a year, or 2 or 3 at once because you have to do that, and student debts and all that, you are part of the working class. Our challenge, and this is a great challenge for any of us to rise up to, is to find and invent the imaginative propaganda that opens up the class to everyone. This doesn't work. This does. Take this back to the drawing board. Try it again. It's going to be wonderful with our allies and with more and more people that we bring in. When do we want to launch this? Our hope is to use May Day, International Workers' Day, 2019. That's about a month away. We haven't figured out the strategy, and some of us who have been following it have to do a lot of work over the next few days and week. I'm hoping that sometime in New York, sometime in April, maybe around the middle of April, if there's an opening here at this facility, that we can have a May Day meeting here, when we have some plans of what we're going to do on May Day and how we're going to open up these proposal for Worker Solidarity Day on a monthly basis. By the way, for some reason, and I think it's a danger sign. There may be, well, let me just say what I'm saying. There seems to be no big May Day activity in New York. We're going to find out over the next few days what's going on around the country. Comrades have been asked to prepare reports on how May Day is shaping up around the country. That there's no May Day event in New York. Maybe it's just one of those things. This good friend or comrade is sick or out of the country or whatever. But I'm fearful that it's deeper than that. I'm fearful it's a sign of the weakness that the most revolutionary forces may be undergoing. And I put our party in that same category, at a time when social democracy is asserting itself, at a time when capitalism is more and more unpopular, at a time when the capitalist crisis is deepening, at a time when the stakes for the class struggle couldn't be greater. Wow, there's a weakness. We got to find a way to turn that around. So I can't tell you tonight, a month away from May 1st, what we're going to do here in New York or what we're going to do around the country. But I'll tell you this, I do believe that it's up to us and perhaps a few of our allies to figure something out that's attractive. It doesn't have to be huge. It just has to be politically on target, and that message of solidarity. Venezuela's got to be in there. And equally important, it's got to launch this Workers' Solidarity Day on a monthly basis. Trump, no. Workers' Solidarity, yes. Given what we should be expecting to unfold in the next period, whatever that means, weeks, months, perhaps years, and that is a deeper and deeper crisis, more radicalization, the potential for more struggle, but also the dangerous stuff too. More racism, more reaction, more homophobia, more anti-worker stuff, more war. I don't think we need to harken back to the 20s and the 30s too much, especially in Europe. But enough said. I mean, the workers lost out. They lost out to fascism and imperialist war, and they were strong. They were big working class parties. Now, everything is completely different now. So you can't just go based on what happened 80 or 90 or 100 years ago. In many ways, just how the struggle will look is impossible to gauge. History only gives you a sense of it, but new conditions based on a different level of global production, based on different levels of consciousness, create scenarios that will be new to us, which is why comrades are best advised to keep an open mind about a lot of things and not just be thinking back to a period when they thought the struggle was great, or for either positive or negative reasons. Positive reasons are better. Our class will need to be moving. They'll need to be moving on as large a basis as they can, as it can, and as high a political basis as it can. That's just generic. And the conditions are right for that. What some of you talked about really was, in our view, the changing character of the working class. The fact that it's more oppressed, it's more black and brown, it's more women, it's more queer, it's more young, you know, and other things, more service and industry, whatever, perhaps more gig, you know, whatever. And this is not just here, but globally. And our message, both politically and in practice, is going to need to establish something. And we'll have to fight to win 99% of the time. White workers, in general, have no shot at surviving unless they block with oppressed workers. Otherwise, they're on a sinking ship or a train to hell, or wherever you want to go. If they fall for Trump's nonsense or some other stupidity, ideologically, whatever, you know, this is time for that. Things are shifting. Oppressed people, not exclusively, but for the most part, globally, are in motion. Asia is rising. You know, not to forget Africa, you know, and Latinx America. You know, these are the areas that are rising. It's not 100 years ago. You know, productive forces are different. They're more equal. We know where the cheap labor is. Trump's trying to tell people, well, you know what? I can do this racist thing, this misogynist thing here, this anti-immigrant thing, and you don't have to go to, you know, Korea. South Korea or some other place for cheap labor. You can come right to the South. As a matter of fact, if I get my way, you can do it in Michigan because we want to break the union. You know, that's sort of his program. You know, it's just a way that we're leveling it, you know. So I hear that. Understanding that the oppressed will be and must be in the leadership because that's healthy. Is a principle to us. You get contradictory things, but they're interesting, like predominantly, I think, white education workers rising up in some place like West Virginia and maybe Kentucky. And I'll tell you, those things shake the shit out of Trumpism. And it's one of the reasons why I am absolutely certain, I mean, state politics and the local class struggle, certainly whatever rules apply, you know, they were applicable. But the last thing that Trumpism wants is for workers, not to, multinational workers, to be rebelling on a class basis. When that starts happening, his ship goes down. The divide workers goes down, you know, and that's what the education workers rising up, that's what it was a glimpse of. It was like, oh, shit. Fix that. Make a concession. This is true. Make a concession. How many concessions they're going to make? You know, you have to go everywhere there's, and there are more education workers struggle breaking out. Finally, generally speaking, the way that workers have been organized has been practical conditions, circumstances, same industry, same geography, a lot of similarities. And there's nothing wrong with that. And organizing workers on that basis will continue. And it will tend to be the most important way to organize workers. And you'll have victories and you'll have setbacks. However, clearly, the means of production, globalization, and every development that we're dealing with has opened up a new potential. It's always been there, but the potential hasn't been as great until now. And that is the political organization of workers. That is, in other words, organizing workers not merely because they work together or because they're similar in generation, or in other ways, organizing workers on the basis of global class consciousness, globally and even deeper socialist and anti-capitalist consciousness. There is a basis for that. That's not pie in the sky, and somebody's got to start doing it. And it doesn't negate organizing workers on a much more practical basis, like the laundry workers do, pizza shop, laundry center. That's part of it. But some workers are going to have to come based on politics, based on we're saying, this is a way to help your class. And yes, that strike in India is important to you. That strike in Mexico is important to you. You don't speak Spanish, but that strike is still important to you, you know. And that strike somewhere in Asia is important to you, you know. And a strike in, I don't know, you know, Greece is important to you. And it might be as important as a strike in the city next door to you. This kind of internationalism, I think, is what the party and forces that are larger than the party are going to have to push. And we'll meet measured success, setbacks, and victories. But it's got to start now. Otherwise, we don't understand what we're dealing with. We're not looking down the road of the crisis that's coming. It's going to be a class crisis. If we don't do it, and when I say we don't, I mean the working class, certainly not the party, do we want the struggle to be called a clash of civilizations, us against them, white workers against the oppressed, you know? Because, believe me, it's not just crazy neo-fascists. There's a segment in the ruling class that's defining the struggle that way. Us against them. Get them out of Europe, get them out of the U.S., it's ours. You know, either it's going to go that way or it's going to go another way. We have to understand, even though we seem small, and when you're small, you can't help but feel a little helpless. In spite of that, based on what we know and what we can do, that we can make a difference in assuring that the struggle doesn't go down, but goes up on a class basis. And as revolutionary politics as is available, you know. I think especially the young people, the millennials, whatever, that are radicalized, you know, pull them into the class struggle. Find a way for them to get in. Maybe joining a union is a way, and that's not bad, but that's got a contradiction, because then you have the conservative baggage of the unions. But that's a contradiction that we've been dealing with. We're not anti-union. We're not whatever we do, it has to happen because the unions can't do it all by themselves, because they're limited until they change, and they will change. Because better and more revolutionary forces will come to the fore and take over unions. It's happening, you know, but it's a slow process. I want to say that because, you know, we're not rivaling the unions. We're not anti-unions. It's just some things have to happen that unions in general are not prepared to do. And also, we have to be more forthright in criticizing unions, you know. But not in some silly way where we're hurling epithets at them like some tendencies do. And the workers say, oh, my union may not be great, but I don't want you attacking it, you know. And you can't blame them for that, you know. We have to do it where it counts. You know, we might have to have a press conference at some point in front of a union and say, we love this union. How come you're not standing up for the immigrant workers? And we want you to make every immigrant worker a member. We want you to give them a membership card. Anybody ask them, yeah, I belong here. Here's my membership card. Yeah, right, you know. The working class has no boundaries. Here's my goddamn, you know, membership. So it's big. It's going to start small, but ultimately it's big stuff that we're moving in the direction of, and I have no doubt that we'll get it right. You know, we've got the determination. I think we see the necessity for it. Just keep our head above water. It's good to look at what's in front of you, but as communists, we have a higher obligation, especially when the world is so small, really, because of the productive forces. We have to be the ones whose head rise up. We have to see not only more geography, we also have to gaze into the future, even where some people around us, you know, their vision might not extend that. That's our role. That's what we do. We say, step up a bit, take a look. You know, we've got to do this, you know. Anyway, comrades, on to International Workers' Day, on to May Day. We're going to find a way to make it real.